Somewhere off the coast of what is now Korea 7,000 years ago, you are sitting in a boat made of skin. There are maybe a dozen of you. The boat is small. The animal is not. The line goes tight. We know this happened because somebody carved it. On a cliff above a stream called the Daegakyeon, there are more than 200 figures cut into the rock. More than 50 are whales drawn well enough that you can still tell the species apart. Humpbacks, grays, and boats with people in them and lines running out to the animal. UNESCO put the site on the World Heritage List in 2025. It is the oldest picture of whaling anyone has ever found. And there is whale bone in the middens nearby to prove it isn't a story. They took the meat, they took the bone, and they took the fat. Now come back. Tonight you're going to stand up, cross a room, and flip a switch. Nothing will die for that. You won't think about it. Nobody does. But for almost every night before this one, something did. So how do you get from a rope tied to an animal to a switch on a wall? The usual answer is that somebody found oil. Apparently not. It was lying on the ground the whole time, and everybody already knew. To understand why nobody wanted it, you have to start with what light was originally made of. Fat. Fat is how a body stores energy for later. Muscle spends it, fat keeps it. Burning fat in a lamp is just taking that energy out fast instead of slowly, which makes a whale a battery you can set on fire. Under the skin, there's a layer of it blubber. But blubber wasn't the prize. Inside the head of a sperm whale, there is a tank of waxy oil called Spermaceti. Whalers opened the skull and bailed it out by the bucket. It cools into a hard, clear wax, and it burns with no smoke and no smell, which is apparently why it cost the most. Benjamin Franklin read by Spermaceti candlelight. And here's how good the best light in the world was. The economist William Nordhaus measured the old sources. A Spermaceti candle, about 1/10 of a lumen per watt. Whale oil, 0.13. The first electric filament bulb in 1883 put out 2.6, 20 times brighter, which means the finest light money could buy for almost all of human history was dimmer than the standby light on your television. So that was the deal. A brighter room meant a bigger animal, which raises a question you have never once had to ask. What did a night cost? Nordhaus worked it out. He fixed an amount of light, 1,000 lumen hours, roughly a reading lamp for an evening, and asked how many hours of work it took to buy. In 1800 in England, about 5.5. Steven Pinker put it in plainer terms. In 1800, you worked 6 hours to burn one candle for 1 hour. Go back further, and it gets worse. Babylon 1750 BC, a sesame oil lamp, 41 hours. Sit with that. A full working day bought you 60 minutes of a small yellow flame that guttered, stank, and constantly blackened the ceiling. So most people didn't buy the evening. They went to bed. Historians of sleep have found that people slept in 2 shifts, down at dark, awake for an hour in the middle of the night, then down again. And apparently there wasn't much to do with that hour because the light to do it by cost more than the hour was worth. Look up from your screen for a second. Every lamp you can see in every room for as long as you want. For almost everyone who has ever lived this room would have been unaffordable. And because a night cost that much, the hunt that supplied it got very, very big. In 1846, there were 735 American whale ships, out of roughly 900 in the entire world. 70,000 people worked in it. By around 1850, whaling was apparently the 5th largest industry in the United States. Read that again. Not the 5th largest maritime industry. The 5th largest industry, full stop. An entire national economy originally organized around lamp fuel. Between 1835 and 1872, those ships killed something like 300,000 whales, more than 7,000 a year every year for a generation. And it cost the people doing it nearly as much. A voyage ran 3 years, sometimes 5. A man signed on, sailed to the Pacific, and came home to a child who could walk and talk and had no idea who he was. That's what the light bulb replaced, not a candle. That. For 7,000 years, light was not a technology. Light was an animal, and an industry that size has exactly one weakness. It only works while the animal is still there. By the 1850s, it wasn't. The grounds they had originally worked were empty, so the ships went further, the far Pacific, then the Arctic, then into the ice itself. Voyages that had taken a year now took 5. Some came back with nothing in the hold. Some didn't come back. In 1871, most of the Arctic fleet was caught by early ice and crushed more than 30 ships abandoned in a single season. Then the Civil War and Confederate raiders burning Union whale ships wherever they found them. And the price of the good oil constantly climbed, past $2 a gallon at a time when a laboring man's entire day was worth less than that. Think about what that actually means. You could work from dark to dark and still not afford the thing that let you see after dark. The fleet that had been 735 ships was under 50 by the 1870s. Everybody tells this as a story about running out of whales. It isn't quite. Apparently, it's a story about running out of light. And the replacement was already there. It had been there for 4,000 years. People had been stepping in it, cursing it, and walking away. Because oil was never hidden. That's the part that breaks the story you've been told. Some of it comes up on its own. A seep where oil finds a crack and leaks out at the surface. No digging required. Leave it in open air and the thin parts evaporate off, and what's left is thick and black and sticky. Bitumen, the dried skin on old paint. People used it. 4,000 years before Christ, builders on the Euphrates were setting mud bricks with it. At Baku, fire came straight out of the bare ground, and people originally built temples around it. At Zigong in Sichuan in 1835, Chinese drillers put a hole 1,001 meters into the earth. Iron bits, bamboo cables, no engine of any kind. The first borehole in human history to pass a kilometer 24 years before Pennsylvania and 15 times deeper. Ironically, they were drilling for salt. In America, oil wasn't treasure either. Originally, it was contamination. Men sinking salt wells kept ruining them by hitting it. The Ruffner brothers on the Kanawha in 1806, a Kentucky well in 1829 that gushed black, caught fire, and burned down the river. And 18th century maps of western Pennsylvania already had a word printed on them: petroleum. So the question was never how we found it. We'd been finding it constantly for 4,000 years and leaving it there. The real question is what changed inside about 10 years that turned a nuisance into the most valuable liquid on Earth. Apparently nobody discovered oil. We discovered we needed a replacement. And the two halves of this story fit together more tightly than anyone realized at the time. Because a whale and a barrel of oil are the same thing. Start at the bottom, sunlight falls on the sea and gets caught by plankton plants and creatures so small you'd need a microscope. Everything in the ocean is built out of plankton or out of something that ate plankton. Follow that chain up far enough and the sunlight ends up as fat inside a very large animal. Now take the plankton that didn't get eaten. It sinks into mud on the sea floor. It gets buried and buried again and constantly gets warmer because the deeper you go, the hotter the earth is. Like a very slow oven. And that oven apparently has a right shelf. Geologists call it the oil window, roughly 2 to 4 kilometers down between about 60 and 120 degrees. Too shallow and it stays sludge. Too deep and it overcooks into gas. In that band, it turns into oil. Same sunlight. Same plankton. 2 containers. One got eaten and swam around. One got buried and cooked. The only real difference is how long each takes to fill. A sperm whale takes 60 or 70 years. The rock takes tens of millions. So we never originally switched from animal fuel to mineral fuel. We switched from the sunlight that was still moving to the sunlight that had stopped. So if it was right there and it was the same energy, why did it take until 1859? The answer has nothing to do with finding it. Pour crude oil straight out of the ground into a lamp and light it. It smokes. It stinks. And if you get it wrong, it doesn't burn at all. It goes off in your hands. That happened to people. Constantly. Because crude oil is not a fuel. It's a mixture. Not one liquid, hundreds of them stirred together. Muddy soup, not a glass of water. Here's the idea that unlocks all of it. Every liquid turns to steam at its own temperature. Water at 100 degrees. Some much lower, some much higher. So put the soup in a pot and heat it slowly. The lightest ingredient boils off first. Catch that steam, run it through a cold pipe, and it turns back into liquid the way steam on a cold window runs back down as clean water. Now you've got only that one ingredient in a jar. Keep heating, and the next comes off. Another jar. That's distillation. Each jar is a fraction. A row of buckets under one pot. Now the ladder. The lightest stuff comes off below 200 degrees, then kerosene from about 150 up to 275. Then diesel. Then the thick oils. Then tar. And kerosene apparently was the one. Heavy enough that it doesn't explode, light enough to climb a wick and burn clean. The Goldilocks bucket. Here's the number pair that explains the next 100 years. Kerosene has to be warmed to around 40 degrees before it gives off a vapor that will catch fire. Gasoline gives off that vapor at 40 degrees below zero. In a lamp, gasoline isn't a fuel. It's a bomb. Some refiners blended it in anyway to stretch the kerosene. Lamps went up in people's hands. States had to pass laws forcing lamp oil to be tested before sale. For 20 years, the light on your table sat dangerously close to being an explosive, and the only thing between them was a thermometer. So the thing that originally unlocked oil was never a drill, which is why the strangest fact in this whole story is the order it happened in. Picture a hall in Charlottetown in 1846. A Canadian geologist called Abraham Gesner lights a lamp. Clean, bright, no smoke. He calls the fuel kerosene. And he has made it originally out of coal, not out of oil at all. 7 years later, a pharmacist in Lviv, Ignacy Łukasiewicz, gets the lamp itself right. On the 31st of July, 1853, surgeons at the local hospital operate through the night by the light of one. The first thing kerosene ever did was let people see inside a human body. So by the mid-1850s, the world knew how to make good lamp fuel. It just didn't have enough to make it from. Then in 1855, a Yale chemist named Benjamin Silliman Jr. was paid $526.08 to analyze rock oil from Venango County. His answer: it can be split by temperature into a first-rate illuminant, and lubricants besides. That report is what moved the money. Investors in New Haven read it, funded a company, and the company hired a man called Edwin Drake. So apparently we didn't find the oil and then work out what it was for. We worked out what it was for and then went looking. Drake's problem in Titusville was that the ground constantly collapsed into his hole. His fix hammer and iron pipe down to bedrock and drill inside it like pushing a straw into a milkshake so the hole stays open. It's called a drive pipe. Every well on Earth still uses it. He never patented it. The town called him Crazy Drake, and the money ran out. On the 27th of August, 1859, at 69.5 feet, they hit it. Earlier that same month, his backers had posted him a check and an instruction: pay the debts, shut it down, come home. The letter arrived a few days after he struck oil. It wasn't the first oil well in the world. Baku had one in the 1840s, Poland in 1854, Ontario in 1858. Apparently, it was just the one that started the industry. 6 weeks later, Uncle Billy Smith went to check the oil in the vat carrying an open lamp. The gas caught. And ironically, the first oil well fire in history burned down the derrick, all the stored oil, and the driller's own house. What happened next took about 18 months. 2,000 barrels came out of the ground in 1859. By 1861, around 2 million. The price of crude went from roughly $20 a barrel to 10 cents. Kerosene at the shop fell from over $1 a gallon to about 10 cents. And here's the number this whole video has been walking toward. In 1800, you worked 6 hours to burn 1 candle for 1 hour. By 1880, you worked 15 minutes for an hour of kerosene light. That isn't a better product. That's a different world. For the first time in the history of the species, an ordinary person could stay up after dark and do something with the time. Read, work, argue. Apparently, the first thing petroleum ever did for the world wasn't move it, it was let people stay awake. And the whole time that was happening, every refinery in the country was constantly dealing with a problem it couldn't get rid of. Kerosene was originally the product, but the lightest fraction, the one off the pot first, was worthless. Too volatile to sell, dangerously unstable to store, gasoline, so they got rid of it. They let it evaporate into the air. They burned it in pits, and they constantly poured it into the nearest river. The Cleveland refiners tipped theirs into the Cuyahoga. The joke in the trade was to dump it and hope it evaporated before the river caught fire. Then engines arrived. Spindletop in 1901, the Model T in 1908. By around 1911, apparently, the garbage was outselling the product. And ironically, electric light then did to kerosene exactly what kerosene had done to the whale. The prize became the byproduct twice in 50 years. Gasoline wasn't the discovery. Gasoline was originally the garbage, and the garbage ate the century. Which brings us back to the whale. You've probably heard that petroleum saved them, and part of that is true. Kerosene collapsed the market for whale oil in lamps, and the American fleet was gone within a generation. Apparently, nobody was killing sperm whales to read by anymore. But the hunting didn't stop. It got an engine, an explosive harpoon gun from 1870. Catcher boats driven by oil-fired engines running constantly faster than anything a whale can swim. From 1925, factory ships with a slipway in the stern so an animal could be hauled aboard whole and taken apart at sea. And the demand moved out of lamps into margarine soap and glycerin for explosives. 2 centuries side by side. The 19th sail hand-thrown harpoons, the one we make films about, roughly 300,000 whales. The 20th, nearly 2.9 million. 761,000 of them sperm whales. Between 1900 and the middle of 1962, industrial whaling killed as many sperm whales as the 18th and 19th centuries put together. And apparently the worst years weren't the age of sail. They were 1946 to 1975. So did petroleum save the whale? It removed one reason to hunt them. Then ironically, it built the ships that did the rest. You can decide what that adds up to. There's one number left, and it's the price. An ecologist called Jeffrey Dukes worked out how much ancient plant and plankton matter had to be buried and cooked to make what we burn. For 1 gallon of petrol, about 90 tons. His own way of putting it, you're loading 40 acres of wheat stalks and roots and all into the tank every 20 miles. And apparently the bill was worked out early. In 1896, 37 years after Drake, a Swedish chemist named Svante Arrhenius calculated what burning it would do to the temperature of the ground. Nobody acted on it for a century. Now go back to the boat. Skin hull, 12 people, a line running down into cold water tied to an animal that could turn around. Honestly, the part that stays with me isn't the whale or the derrick. It's that nobody originally wanted oil. They wanted the evening. Everything after that, the engines, the plastic, the whole century was changed from a purchase nobody meant to make. That old fuel was one you had to look in the eye. It fought back, it ran out, and it took 40 years to grow another one. You are still constantly burning plankton to see in the dark. You just stopped having to look at it. The switch on your wall is the same transaction. Same sunlight, same plankton, same stored fat. We only took the animal out of it and put 100 million years in. Apparently, we never found a new kind of fuel. We found an older one. More of these on the channel if you want them.